Hey, everybody, Mike Shelby here. And last night, some friends and I went to go see this new movie called Civil War. We're mostly prior service military guys, veterans of Iraq and Afghanistan. We wanted to see how good or how bad or how outlandish this movie was. It did not disappoint. I'm going to break this video up into two segments. The first segment will be my honest general reflections and review of the movie. And then the second part, we're going to get a little more tactical and talk about some of my intelligence considerations, some of maybe intelligence lessons learned as I went through the film. I was taking notes like a nerd. And so let's go ahead and jump into my honest review. Is this a psyop? Well, just generally, this movie is not actually about a civil war. It is about a small team of photojournalists who are navigating through the disruption of a civil war. And these protagonists are trying to go from New York City to Washington, D.C. because they want to interview the president. And the problem is they're in a race to D.C. because the Western forces, this is the secessionist armies of California and Texas, and they're trying to invade D.C. to topple the U.S. government. And so this plot is strained from the very start, and likely for good reason. I'll explain why I think that is later. Let's just set aside the unrealistic plot here and continue. So back in February, when this trailer dropped, a lot of the sentiment surrounding this movie was centered on predictive programming. And that's a term that describes efforts by people, the powers that be, to shape public opinion or to modify behavior by injecting certain concepts into pop culture and the American zeitgeist. And this is something that we call psychological operations. I really first heard about predictive programming and the pop culture references to it back during the Netflix movie Leave the World Behind. And that was a movie where the US suffers a devastating cyber attack and subsequent coup or revolution. I think we don't even really know. And that film was produced by an Obama-backed film production company. It carries heavy racial undertones, big surprise there. And some pundits speculated that that movie was a way to psychologically prepare Americans for a similar impending scenario. I never bought into that theory, but I did watch the movie. Unfortunately, I thought it was more likely than not just another culturally subversive media production with a bad plot that also didn't make sense. It was also really bad. Now, some have accused this movie studio, A24, of producing the Civil War movie to psychologically prepare Americans to consider or even accept a violent conflict in a tense election year. I didn't get the sense personally that Civil War is predictive programming. This movie is largely apolitical. There is no reference to political parties or ideology. And we don't even really know why the Civil War is being fought in the first place. And that is certainly by design. These Western forces of California and Texas, they're strange bedfellows. None of the other regions are apparently involved in the war, or if they are, we're not made known of it. And so my takeaway is that Civil War is like most other Hollywood roller coaster movies with bad plots that are hyped for commercial success. This movie could have been extremely political. It could have been released on January the 6th. This plot could have included an army drawn from Texas to Southern Virginia invading Washington, D.C. It could have been about scary fascists fighting for a Trump-like politician and the democracy-loving good guys who prevail over evil at the very end. But it was none of those things. It's really a politically uninteresting movie that features some brutal realities of war. I think that was honestly the best part of the film. It features armed violence and graphic shootouts, torture, lots of people being killed, some of them being executed. If there are any political messages in this movie at all, it's that war is ugly and brutal and that civil war is something that should be avoided. So this small team of photojournalists, they're mostly at the mercy of their environment. They get caught up in these very tense and dangerous situations, these action scenes where people are being shot and killed. There are F-35s and Apache helicopters flashing across the big screen. The combat scenes are chaotic. And actually, that was probably the biggest reflection from my group of buddies. A friend of mine who was in Desert Storm and a couple of tours in Iraq, including the Iraq invasion. He said, He said, yeah, that's exactly what it was like for us. It's chaotic. Nobody really knows what's going on. And then you get some, platoon sergeant or platoon leader who says, hey, let's go do this. And then everyone just goes and does that. And that's essentially exactly what happened in the movie. And there are explosions everywhere. Veterans of Iraq and Afghanistan are likely to laugh at some of the unrealistic, over the top combat scenes. We were the only people laughing in the movie theater when that javelin got fired off. Listen, this movie doesn't offend anyone's political sensibilities. It is just another daft Hollywood thriller aiming for mass commercial appeal to make lots of money for the studio. And it should, because the film, if nothing else, was pretty entertaining. Now, let's move on to my intelligence observations. I'm going to take these glasses off because I can't see, what through them. This section will contain potential spoilers. First of all, this movie opens with a propaganda speech. The president is rehearsing lines saying, trying to convince the American people just how close the federal government, the United States government, is to winning this war. And he says, we're on the verge of winning, and this is going to be the most historic military victory in the history of the country, maybe the history of the world. And in the span of less than 2 hours later, maybe days, maybe a couple weeks later, movie time, the dude's literally getting pucked. Actually, he's just killed in the Oval Office. So that's the first thing I would note. This movie starts with propaganda. The second point I would note is that this photojournalist team, they're trying to travel 800 miles from New York City. They're taking the long way around. They got to cut through Pennsylvania. They basically got to go through like Pittsburgh and West Virginia and then drop down because they're not able to drive through Philadelphia. So, okay, decent data point there in terms of intelligence. But otherwise, and listen, I know it's a movie, but they're traveling 800 miles with no situational awareness, no intelligence. I didn't even see any maps in this whole movie. And a woman was driving. So, they had to have gotten lost somewhere along the way. None of that stuff's in the movie. Ideally, if I'm in that situation and I've got to travel 800 miles, I want a few things. Number one, for what it may be or may not be worth, I've got to run a police scanner. And you've got to run a police scanner to know what police may be doing or what police may be responding to in your area. And there's one police scanner that I really like. And you can essentially create a bubble for that thing. And you can say, just give me any radio transmission that you think is within, say, 2 to 5 miles of our current location. It also comes with a GPS antenna. This is the unit in Home Patrol too, by the way. It comes with a GPS antenna that will auto update your position. And so that scanner will just constantly be scanning the local emergency services frequencies based on your location. That's one of the great benefits of that scanner is it has emergency services frequencies pre-programmed on that thing for the United States and Canada. So I want, if nothing else, and you may not even get anything in a realistic scenario like this, if the police aren't communicating through the radio, and I don't think there were cell signals because I didn't see a cell phone in the whole movie, at least that was connected. So if police aren't communicating through the radio, you're obviously not going to get anything. But listen, it's better than nothing. So that's one thing. No situational awareness, no intelligence on this 800-mile journey. Now, I think somewhere around Pennsylvania or West Virginia, this group of photojournalists comes upon a refugee camp. And this is where they can get food. There's no tents there. Lots of people. It's like some kind of stadium, a football stadium or something like that. And so lots of refugees. Listen, as an intel guy, I'm looking at refugees. I see people, I see sensors. And so if we're trying to get from West Virginia to Charlottesville, Virginia, which is where they were headed, I'm going to start combing through all those refugees and asking who's from Charlottesville or who recently came from that Charlottesville area. Get a sense of road conditions and potential choke points and figure out where any hot spots are. Figure out where I've got to get the lay of the land. I've got to look at physical terrain, number one, and then I've got to look at potential threats and hazards along the way. And so, I would basically be doing tactical screening or screening for intelligence value, trying to find someone who recently came from that area. I mean, it may not even be Charlottesville. They just came from, they live 15 or 30 or 50 miles east of there, and that's better than nothing. I want to know what that 15, 30, or 50 miles eastward looks like. I want to know what the roads look like. So again, it's not an intel movie, but if you ever find yourself in that situation, refugees have intelligence value because they came from somewhere. Now, on that point, intelligence has a shelf life. Obviously, if these refugees came from Charlottesville a month ago, they're not going to be able to provide us timely or maybe not even accurate information. However, if someone were in Charlottesville or were east of your location or along your chosen travel route, hours or days, then obviously you've potentially hit a gold mine here. And that individual may be able to tell you, may be able to provide information to you that could potentially save your life on this journey. We're talking about almost like a Mad Max scenario here. Another thing I want to point out is foreign currency. So the character of Kirsten Dunst in this movie has Canadian dollars. And she pulls up to this gas station and she says, hey, I've got $300. Can we get a half a tank of gas and 2 gas cans or whatever she says? And the guy laughs. The guy laughs and he says, oh, around here, $300, we'll get you a sandwich. So you want ham or cheese? And she says, no, I've got 300 Canadian. And his demeanor absolutely changes. And so if you are let's just say the United States does have some kind of Mad Max scenario, diversifying into foreign currencies is probably a good idea especially if you're near a border area. This is one thing that we saw. Well, it's one thing I've read about the Weimar hyperinflation. People were very, very happy to accept French and Swiss currency, any kind of foreign currency that were not the German marks being hyperinflated into oblivion. And then finally, the last point I want to make is this photojournalist team, they get separated. They're in 2 vehicles. They get separated, which is not ideal. And the 2 people in the lead vehicle get kidnapped. And so they're searching for these 2 people. And one of the people who kidnapped is a cute girl. And so, obviously there's like some tense situations there. Nobody wants to see anything bad happen to this cute little girl. And they finally meet up with these 2 armed people. And it's very unclear exactly what side they're on. Are they on Western forces? It doesn't appear to be. I think they're in like West Virginia or somewhere, maybe Virginia. And it doesn't appear to be that they're federal troops either. And the reality is, we saw this during our own Civil War. The reality of armed, non-aligned groups. Armed groups in a low intensity conflict or civil war, domestic conflict scenario that are not aligned with any quote unquote major power, not aligned with any side. And I expect that is going to be the reality of a lot of places where people are not fighting for one side or the other. They're just fighting for themselves. They're fighting for their community or fighting for their county or maybe their state. They're just fighting to keep bad people out in general. And so that's where these red glasses come from. One of those guys in the movie, he's asking these photojournalists what kind of Americans they are, where they're from. And one girl's from Missouri, another girl's from Colorado. He says, yeah, both of those places are from America, or both of those places are American. And then one guy is from Hong Kong. He gets killed. Spoiler alert. The other guy's he says he's from Florida. He doesn't appear to be from Florida, from South America or Central America somewhere. He miraculously lives. So those are my general observations about the movie. Look, it was an entertaining movie. All right. I wouldn't go see it again. And it's worth the watch. I would honestly, what I do is I'd normally just wait for movies to come out on the movie channels. But it was a good movie and it was worth the watch. So everyone, hey, thanks so much. If you like this video, let me know, subscribe to the channel and hit that like button, maybe even leave me a comment and maybe I'll do some more. Let's do some more intelligence lessons learned videos. How about that? Thanks for watching. And until next time, be well and stay out front.